Count your blessings, ladies and gentlemen, because this is Brian Pillman Jr., and you're listening to the most influential podcast. You're listening to the Pro Wrestling Proverbs.
Logan, over the next couple of weeks, we're going to be putting out a very brutal and gruesome podcast series that's not going to be very fun to talk about. And I think it'd be interesting to start it off with this episode detailing the career of Chris Benoit before we get into his tragic final weekend. But before we do that, we're gonna do our housekeeping notes here. I just got off a podcast with our friend Andrew over at Windley Mania, and Andrew and I forgot the other guy's name, Devin. Andrew and Devin over at Windley Mania. We talked about Mr. Nanny. So if you after you get done listening to this and you want to get cheered up, I want you to just go over there and listen to us talk about Terry Hulk Hogan, as he goes by in the movie.
He is Mr. Nanny. Would you say that's your favorite Hulk Hogan movie you've ever watched?
Yeah, because it's the only one. And
You haven't watched any other Hulk Hogan movies? You've never seen Santa with Muscles or No Holds Barred, or you haven't watched the TV show Thunder in Paradise?
No.
You're missing out.
I'm not missing out. I got the gist of it.
He was also in Muppets in Space.
I watched Hogan Knows Best, and we get into that on the podcast a little bit. Like I tell him, like, the only way you'll ever be able to get me back on to talk about Hulk Hogan media is if we're watching Hogan Knows Best, because that show is an absolute riot.
I like I said, he was in Muppets in Space. He played a security guard for the bad guys. And it's funny because it's like 2001, so it's when the NWO come back to WWE. And one of the Muppets goes, "Hulk, what about your fans?" And then he cuts a promo about how he ripped off the red and yellow. And he's in the black and white, brother. And then he was also in, I don't know if you remember, but he's in Gremlins briefly. The Gremlins mess up the movie as it's playing, and then he put that movie back on. And then they get scared of him. So Gremlins, monsters from another planet that kill people in a city. Hulk Hogan scared him.
Well, he's a man of many traits.
Some
acting
good, some
acting
bad.
is not one of them. He's
No. But I'm glad you watched it. Maybe I'll have to have you watch some other, not only Hulk Hogan media, but wrestlers in movies. Some more Roddy Piper ones. The AWA put one out called The Wrestler.
Yeah, we'll
I have a great one called Pro Wrestlers vs. Zombies.
Yeah, we're gonna have to do probably for the YouTube. We're gonna have to do a wrestling movie series. That'd be really fun. But yeah, Andrew from Windley Mania will be on our show here in the coming weeks, probably after the Benoit stuff is done. We haven't decided exactly what we're gonna talk about with him yet. We got a couple of things. He's a big Japanese wrestling fan, so we might have to do something. And that's something we haven't really touched much on the
No, not a whole lot.
So it might be
little nuggets, but
it might be interesting. But I think it's time to get the task at hand. If you follow us on social media, you probably know that I've been teasing this for the past couple of weeks. I've been working on it tediously every night. So this is part one, or I don't even.
It should be the
Prelude.
Prelude. Is it the prologue?
Yeah, prologue. It's gonna be a prologue to my 25-page script on the Benoit double murder suicide. It is filled with information I don't think many casual wrestling fans will know. Because I know the information's out there that if people really went down the rabbit hole, they'd be able to find it.
Yep.
But I don't know if many people know about the text messages that were sent between
Right.
Chris and Nancy, and kind of like the pattern of abuse that came to head rather quickly.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even just in 2007. There's
Nope.
reports made back in like the 2003 time.
Yeah, there's a lot of details. Like you said, people can find if they dig far enough. I think I've got 3 books on my shelf right now. Each one gives a different little perspective. A lot of them overlap, but some of them you'll find different things. And I'm sure this will be just like that, where there'll be different bits of information that people have never heard of, and there'll be little things that can help them connect the dots along the way.
Yeah,
But
I've listened to a lot of Chris Benoit, like YouTube documentaries and podcast episodes and stuff like that, and I've tried to get everything they offered into ours as well. So like very rarely have I seen people describe the police report, like the crime scene, like what the police officers found when they walked in. It's very, very gruesome. So there'll be a warning at the beginning of each of those episodes, because this can get pretty intense. Before we get to that, we're going to do something that not many people would be willing to do, and we are not going to be glorifying him in any way. It's just we're just trying to provide as much context as possible, and it's hard to talk about Chris Benoit without talking about his in-ring career. And if we did that, and then in the next episodes, we'd be there for 4 hours. So we're gonna try to get it out of the way now before we get into the meat and bones of what happens. So Logan?
It's interesting to really think about, because we were talking about it before. My brother's becoming a big wrestling fan. He was born August 2006, so you figure he was 1 when this happened. And that's a lot of the wrestling fans now, with WWE kind of marching along, with Impact being good, with NWA, and your Combat Zone Wrestling and your GCWs like appearing on YouTube, AEW doing what it's doing. A lot of fans at this point, if they're new fans, they don't have like family. Like, I know your dad watched wrestling, my dad, my uncle, my grandpa, that kind of thing. If it's a new fan that doesn't have, so like my wife Sam, no one in her family watched it, so she would have no idea really who he is.
Right.
Like, we're past the point. It used to be years ago, oh, you like wrestling? Well, that guy, killed his family, killed himself. Now, you don't really hear about him. And it's odd. It makes sense because WWE wiped his career away. And like you said, we're not going to glorify him. If you're into professional wrestling, like not sports entertainment, if you're into wrestling, Japanese strong style, submission holds, your Dynamite Kids, your Bret Harts, your Owen Harts, even now your Daniel Bryans, looking up a Chris Benoit match or 2, definitely the way to go. He's one of those guys I don't really think ever truly had like a bad, I forget who we said this about last time, but he doesn't have a bad match.
Yeah.
His matches improve based on who he's around. Like, obviously, if he was in there with a Kurt Angle or a Shawn Michaels, then it would be a phenomenal match. If he was in there, Eugene or Rob Conway, might not be, a 5-star classic, but it'd still be good because he could carry people. And he did this throughout his whole career. Not going to spend too much time on it. Before he made the big time Started in Stampede Wrestling, like all Canadian wrestlers do. He loved Dynamite Kid, which if you watch a Dynamite Kid match, watch a Chris Benoit match, I would even say, I know I just said it, you watch a Daniel Bryan match, they're almost all one and the same at this point. Yeah. You got the suplexes, you got the hard kicks, the hard punches. They put their body on the line, headbutts. I think you can tell Benoit had a lot of influence on Daniel Bryan, which is upsetting for Daniel because you can't really say that.
No, you can't. He can't give credit.
Like, it was a 2K interview, I think, and Kurt Angle said that Chris Benoit was his favorite opponent. The internet almost like burnt down that he said the name.
Yeah. So it's interesting to see, like every once in a while, a YouTube video will be recommended to me, and it's times WWE's mentioned Chris Benoit, and that's always on there. And I think Chris Jericho said something too.
Yeah.
There might have been a Hall of Fame speech or something. I don't remember.
But I mean, like I said, Stampede Wrestling again, great wrestling. Around the time Benoit was there, it was kind of at the tail end of Stampede Wrestling. You figure Bret Hart and Dynamite Kid and British Bulldog had already left. And at this point is when your Owen Hart and your Brian Pillmans were leaving. They weren't left with a whole lot. After it closed its doors in '89, when Benoit was still there, Bad News Brown recommended him to go to New Japan Pro Wrestling. And Bad News Brown is one of those names where he fought Roddy Piper at WrestleMania, because that's when Piper painted himself half black. Besides that, he's not very familiar name. He had a pretty big following in Canada. He had a pretty big following in Japan. So him telling Benoit to go there, that was kind of a big feather in Benoit's cap. He went to New Japan, went through the dojo again, as everyone does. He started wearing a mask. He was the Pegasus Kid, and there he showed more Dynamite Kid style wrestling. He feuded with Jushin Liger. He feuded with Otani. He feuded with Black Tiger, who would later become Eddie Guerrero.
Yep.
Chris Jericho has said numerous times that the reason that he was Lionheart is because Benoit was Pegasus Kid and Guerrero was Black Tiger. He wanted to be an animal just like them. So, I mean, and you figure Jericho started wrestling early 90s, late 80s. So if they had that big of impact on him then, the impact, I mean, like I said with Daniel Bryan, that Benoit has to have on other people now.
Yeah, it's definitely still there. And this is the first time Chris Benoit and Eddie Guerrero meet is over here in Japan. And according to Vicky from the Dark Side of the Ring, Eddie Guerrero hated him. Like when they first met, he thought he was like the biggest prick ever. But it wasn't until they started working like every night, putting these matches together, that they became the best of friends that they would later be known for. So for that to be put out there for the timeline.
It's interesting. Like you said, he was looked at as a prick, but it's because he was the guy. You figure a lot of wrestlers at that time, especially 80s, 90s, drinking, partying. He was the guy that just wanted to go work out. He wanted to get bigger. He was shorter in height, so he would always be overlooked. And it always baffles me when people say that about older wrestlers. So, like I said, your Owens, your Eddies, Dean Malenko, Chris Jericho. It's like the impact they have now. But then, which, I mean, I get it, looking at the big names at the time. I mean, Hogan was larger than life, but Hogan was also, what, 6'8", 6'9"?
I think so, yeah.
Stinger was big, Warrior's big, and they all had the muscles too. I mean, even Ric Flair, as crazy as it sounds, Ric Flair was a pretty muscular guy.
Oh, yeah.
And he wasn't short. Plus, he always peacocked as well. That's been why I was trying to find that. Interestingly enough, while in Japan, the light heavyweight title was brought over there by the Dynamite Kid, and it was kind of a Japanese-only title. WWE didn't recognize it for years till they brought it back in the late 90s. Chris Benoit actually won the title while in Japan. So I think with everything else he won, the only titles that he missed out on in WWE lore would have been a hardcore and then like the WWE Championship. But after this, went to WCW for a minute. They had a tag team championship tournament where, if I remember, countries had representatives. So like his partner was Biff Wellington, excuse me. The Malenkos teamed up. There was a Mexican team of Rey Mysterio Sr. and Conan. Just an interesting way to let foreign countries get representation out there. They really didn't do much. He went back to Japan. Then he got called to ECW. I know that it's said that he was called the Crippler first because he took Sabu out.
I just have before you get too further, I have a interesting note here. Biff Wellington.
Uh-huh.
Do you want to take a guess on when he died? Without looking.
Is it like recent? No. Like why?
He died on June 24th, 2007. The same day, Chris Benoit.
That's a fun fact. All right.
And they were tag team partners.
But
I just want to throw that out there. Just wanted to throw that into the universe. That's how this universe works. He's also battling drug addiction as well. So
okay. But as I was saying,
go on.
People think that he's called the Crippler because of when he, flipped Sabu. Sabu broke his neck. We'll get to that in a bit. But he actually put Rocco Rock out. Rocco Rock was a member of the Public Enemy. I know that you'll mention Chris Benoit's relationship with fellow Public Enemy member Johnny Grunge. So I just kind of find it interesting. And again, there's that connection there. Benoit actually competed in that infamous NWA title tournament where Shane Douglas won and threw the title down. He lost in the quarterfinals match to Too Cool Scorpio. Then it was later when he broke Sabu's neck. If you're unfamiliar with it, they tried to do a spot, flipped him up. Sabu landed right on his head, broke his neck. This is one of those instances where it was used to make the wrestler appear meaner, appear stronger. But again, as you hear with all these stories, Benoit checked on him. Benoit was worried. I didn't mean to break your neck. Don't hate me. And Sabu, being the performer he is, don't worry about it, that kind of thing. He actually broke down because, he thought he paralyzed someone. And Paul Heyman, being the guy he is, really emphasized the Crippler moniker at that point.
Yeah, it sounds like
this made him be a dominant heel. And then Paul Heyman said in the Rise and Fall of ECW book that he wanted Benoit to eventually be the ECW World Champion, making him a threat at the time. If this lines up with what I think it does, this would have been around the time that Taz was still the Tasmaniac. So I'm thinking that Taz's gimmick, when he dropped the Wild Guy act and he did the submissions and the suplexes, it almost seemed like that was created for Benoit. But then because Benoit would go to WCW, Heyman had to put it on someone. Just an interesting little thing to think about there. He did win his first American title in ECW. Him and Dean Malenko, again, the third member in that trio of him, Eddie, and Malenko. They won the ECW World Tag titles from Sabu and the Tasmaniac. And then after that, they were put into one of my guilty pleasures in wrestling, the Triple Threat. Shane Douglas, Dean Malenko, and Benoit. Shane Douglas, on a side note, was a man who hated Ric Flair and wanted everything better. So in this, he created the Triple Threat, his own version of the Horseman. Once they lost the championship to the Public Enemy, and Benoit kind of just was going through the motions until he eventually went to WCW. Before this, he was working with New Japan, and then he came over to WCW as part of an angle. I don't know, I'm sure you know, but those listening, they say that the Bullet Club copied NWO, and the NWO copied a storyline from New Japan. So it all kind of circles itself, where New Japan and WCW did this little talent exchange. Benoit ended up coming to WCW. He was picked by Flair and Anderson to be a member of the Horsemen along with Brian Pillman. As a Horseman fan, I look at it this way: the original four are Ric Flair, Arn Anderson, Tully Blanchard, Barry Windham. But then if you had to make like a B squad for the Horsemen, it would be Benoit, Malenko, Pillman, and then like a Kurt Hennig, even though he was barely with the group.
Yeah.
Benoit's time with the Horsemen, I mean, he was always a member from that moment onward until they fully disbanded, 98 or 99. This is when, at the beginning here, they feuded with the Dungeon of Doom, which led to the infamous Kevin Sullivan booking his own divorce. I don't want to give too much of that away because I'm sure you talk about that at length.
Yeah.
But it was just, as I briefly said there, Kevin Sullivan put his wife at the time, Nancy, with Chris, and it was supposed to be she was leaving Chris for Kevin on TV, and it happened behind the scenes. You hear about this happening sometimes, like when they put Triple H and Stephanie together. I believe it's called the Rule of Attraction, or just when you're around someone so much,
Yeah.
you end up falling for them, or you end up enjoying your time with them. So you want to take that a step further. After he retired Kevin Sullivan on screen, Benoit kind of went through the motions until he fought with Booker T over the television championship. Then Booker and Benoit had what's regarded as one of the best of 7 series. After this, again, kind of went through it. Benoit once again teamed up with Dean Malenko. They defeated Kurt Hennig and Barry Windham to win the WCW Tag Championships, which then led to the reformation of the Four Horsemen: Arn Anderson, Steve Mongo McMichael, Ric Flair. This is when Ric Flair came back after being suspended and almost fired by Eric Bischoff for missing a Thunder taping. So it was a big moment.
That happens a
with
lot
Arn
of
Anderson.
times over Ric Flair's career. Him almost getting fired by Eric Bischoff.
Yeah. And you figure what makes this even more special is it was always Rick and Arn. Well, with Arn being retired because of his neck, Chris Benoit was then looked at as the enforcer of the Four Horsemen. So you figure, even though it was for a little over a year, if that, Chris Benoit was seen as the number 2 in one of the most prestigious stables of all time. Malenko feuded with the Flock, Billy Kidman and Rey Mysterio. Shortly after this, though, Benoit and Malenko left the Horsemen. They teamed up with Perry Saturn, who would be a member of the Radicals, and then their former friend Shane Douglas. They'd be the Revolution. Another good stable here. WCW was full of them at this time. You had the Revolution, you still had the NWO, you had the Wolfpack, you had the Filthy Animals, you had the Dark Carnival, the Dungeon of Doom, just to name some of them. Their whole gimmick was they wanted WCW to stop pushing older stars and for them to get a push.
No, Logan,
which I know sounds... Yeah.
Did that happen? Did they stop pushing
No.
older stars for the younger ones?
That's what I was saying. WCW didn't stop doing that, and neither did wrestling.
No. They still don't.
I mean, it was a good group. It was a good idea. At the top of my mind, this is the first time I can really think of this happening. I mean, DX kind of joked about it or talked about it. But this is the first time that it was a group of young guys being like, hey, fuck the regime, get Ric Flair out of here, stop having Roddy Piper on screen every week. Hulk Hogan's old. Let us take charge. They seceded from WCW, complete with a flag. I guess this time you could say that this secession actually wasn't about slavery.
Okay.
But as always, there's some friction between Benoit and Shane Douglas. I mean, what good group doesn't have friction between two of their top guys? Benoit became face. He won the TV and the United States title again after this time. In October '99, he wrestled Bret Hart in a tribute to Owen Hart in what is regarded as one of the best matches, especially that these two ever had. And then, as he continued to get unhappy at WCW, they offered him that last olive branch. He won the WCW title. He beat Sid Vicious, and he held the title for one day. WCW did not acknowledge the reign after he left. WWE eventually did. It was one of those weird things as a kid, because one of my favorite things to do would be to look at the title history that WWE.com would have.
Yeah.
Because you'd be able to click on the link, and it would show who they beat, it would show how long they had it, a couple little notes. And then when he won the title at WrestleMania 20, it's his first world title. On their website, shows him with the world title. And it threw me off even more, because you figure if he won the WCW and the big gold belt, they're the same damn thing. So I'm looking at it, and I'm like, that's not when he won it. Like, why is Arn Anderson there? Where's Eddie?
Little Logan's having an existential crisis
Yeah,
on the family computer.
What happened? After this, he left. Barry Saturn left. Dean Malenko left. Eddie Guerrero left. It's kind of upsetting. Because, Dean Malenko had a good career afterward. Won the light heavyweight title. He was one of the big mainstays in the light heavyweight division. Then he became a big producer. I believe he's with AEW now.
Yeah.
Eddie Guerrero had obviously the legendary career. We both have agreed in length that him and Benoit, had they lived, probably would have been NXT trainers.
No doubt.
They probably would have been two of the first ones. Perry Saturn wasn't so lucky. I would say before the jump to WWE, he was probably one of the more successful ones, because he had one of ECW's top tag teams in the Eliminators. In WCW, he was the first to break away from Raven's Flock, which was a huge deal. He won the TV and US titles. He was one of the first ones that could really match with Goldberg. It was for a few seconds, but still, it was something. But then he ended up falling in love with a mop and beating the shit out of a jobber and getting fired for it.
Hey, you win some, you lose some, I guess, right?
Yeah, yeah. But after the Radicals came, they formed with Triple H. He won his first title just over a month after signing, when he pinned Jericho in the triple threat match to win Kurt Angle's Intercontinental title. That's the one where Jericho also won the European title, and Kurt Angle lost both of his Eurocontinental championships. Early on, he was in main event, challenged The Rock. Him and Jericho fought in main events. Him and Jericho teamed up and faced the two-man power trip. This is a TLC match that a lot of people, obviously, they don't really hear about now. It's kind of skipped over because Benoit was in it. But it's one of the better ones. You figure Austin, Triple H, and Jericho already. That's three of the top names in not only the Attitude Era, but possibly all time. Then you've got Benoit in there. Again, this is one to search out. He missed the Invasion storyline, which, might have been good for him, because there's not very many people that made it out of the Invasion storyline without looking just dumb.
Looking like a moron.
I mean, what? RVD, the Dudleys, and Lance Storm? Is that about it? Maybe Booker T?
Yeah,
I mean, because you figure Ric Flair came in the day after.
Mm-hmm.
There's no NWO, no Goldberg, no Steiner. DDP stalked Undertaker's wife and then got beat by his wife. Everyone else was kind of a mid-card jobber.
But nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. He was actually the third wrestler picked to be a part of Vince McMahon's SmackDown roster. So if I see this up real fast, just to give you the idea of where Benoit was held at. Number 1 pick for SmackDown was The Rock. Number 1 for Raw was Taker. Number 2 for SmackDown was Kurt Angle. Number 2 for Raw was the NWO, Nash, Pac, and Hall.
Damn.
And Raw was 3 for SmackDown. Also picked for SmackDown this night, because they went through the top. Yeah, let's see. Hogan was right after him. Edge was picked 6 for SmackDown. Let's see if there's any other names that jump out. The Hardys were 13 and 15 for Raw. Mr. Perfect was 16 for Raw. Kane was 3 for Raw. RVD was 4. And that's him coming off of an injury, which, as a lot of you know, Vince doesn't tend to give you a good spot when you come back.
Not typically, no. Especially this Vince.
Well, yeah, this Vince, and you figure this is before Benoit was a main event player. I mean, he had his matches with The Rock, but so did Billy Gunn and Rikishi. I mean,
yeah,
it's one of those things. He briefly feuded with Stone Cold. Eddie Guerrero got fired and came back during this time. Benoit won the Intercontinental title, and they went to SmackDown. They were one of the first big people to jump to SmackDown once the GMs were in place, being Stephanie and Bischoff. SmackDown kind of had a killing. They made Brock Lesnar the WWE title SmackDown exclusive. Benoit and Guerrero went to SmackDown. They were doing pretty well.
This was the beginning of the SmackDown 6.
Yeah. Yep, this is also the beginning of the time when I started watching, because I remember her saying Benoit and Guerrero were on SmackDown, and there's there were heels there. Before this was when I mentioned my favorite pay-per-view was that Vengeance 2002. They had a really good tables match with Bubba Ray and Spike. Once they were on SmackDown, Eddie and Chris kind of went their own separate ways. Eddie formed with Chavo. Speaking of the SmackDown 6, Chris Benoit got put with Kurt Angle, and they won the first ever WWE Tag Team Championships. I always laugh thinking about this because you figure they reintroduced the SmackDown tag titles twice. Benoit and Angle won the first iteration, and Heath Slater and Rhino won the second.
Hey, what you gotta say about Heath Slater and Rhino?
They're not Chris Benoit and Kurt Angle.
Yeah, they're right. They're better.
Yeah.
He's got kids. They got kids, man. I don't give a damn about your kids.
And like you said, SmackDown 6, you figure they fought Los Guerreros, and then they fought Rey Mysterio and Edge. And interesting to think. I think of this comparison a lot. Compare these guys to the TLC 6.
Okay.
Jeff Hardy won a heavyweight title in WWE.
Mm-hmm.
Matt Hardy won a heavyweight title outside of it. Edge won a heavyweight title in WWE. Christian won outside of it. Bubba won outside of it. Devon didn't win anything.
Matt Hardy won the ECW.
Yeah.
Championship.
Yeah.
That's a world championship, right?
Yeah, the WWE, especially that silver one. That one mattered.
Yeah, that's the best one.
Then if you look at these guys, Benoit won in WWE. Angle, sure he won in TNA, but he won in WWE. Ray won in WWE. Edge won in WWE. Guerrero won in WWE. And I mean, if you're counting the ECW as one, then technically all 6 won because Chavo won.
Yeah, Chavo did win. I forgot about that. He was not as memorable as Matt Hardy's reign, but
yeah. It's just these 6 did so much, and you figure that was 2002, and I mean, Edge and Ray are still going, and it's not necessarily pro wrestling related, but Chavo's a producer on Young Rock. I mean,
in getting his calls forwarded by Tony Khan. So
yeah, I mean, Chavo showed up at Ring of Honor for like 5 seconds, and then Bandito kicked him out. So great matches. Any of them that you watch with these 3 teams, you can there's something about them. I don't think there's been a couple tag teams that have meshed since then, like Usos and New Day, or the Revival and the Briscoes, but these 6 truly had something. And again, it's just amazing to think about, because Kurt Angle's not really a tag wrestler. Mysterio at the time was really a cruiserweight. So was Chavo. Edge was still young. So it just, imagine what they could have done had they been matured wrestlers in the ring. Benoit and Angle split after Benoit became a face. He feuded with Angle for the heavyweight title that Angle had. Benoit then formed a tag team with Rhino. It was an interesting team. I remember my dad thought it was funny that they were together. He called them like the Broken Necks, because that's why Rhino was off TV for so long. And that was like his only comparison as to why they put them together. Either that or because they have animal names. Like, there's no real reason why Rhino and Benoit should have been a team.
Right.
Benoit feuded with Cena after WrestleMania 19. This is where he wore his, I wish I would have bought one before everything happened, his Toothless Aggression shirt. And it would have a little gap-toothed smile on it.
Yeah.
WWE brought back the U.S. title. Ironically enough, the United States Championship, the finals, was between a Mexican and a Canadian. Eddie won. They feuded over the title, which I think they did that because when you think the U.S. title, you obviously think of WCW. Those were 2 of the better mid-card WCW guys. After this, Benoit feuded with Brock Lesnar quite a bit. And into the Royal Rumble, Paul Heyman named him as the #1 entry. He's like I said, he's feuded with Brock, so he's trying to do everything he can to put walls up in his way. And 2004, he became the 2nd man to win a Royal Rumble, starting at #1. And since then, Edge has been the only other person to do it.
You mean Edge has been the first person to do it?
Edge would be the 2nd.
I know, I'm just joking with you.
I would say Shawn and Edge. WWE likes to ignore Benoit, or they'll say 3 men have won it, including Shawn Michaels and Edge. And then you're sitting at home and you're like, I thought you said 3. Like, at this point, shouldn't they just say multiple men have done it? So that way people don't go Googling who the other guy was.
I guess so. Or just don't even bring it up.
Yeah.
Just be
like say, Shawn Michaels and Edge have both.
Or just be like, draw #1, be one of the first 2 superstars to enter Royal Rumble. It's a bad deal, but it has been done before. And then move on.
This was the first time. I mean, the brand split was still relatively new. But this is the first time that someone jumped shows. Because he was on SmackDown. He wanted Raw. And it was a nice little story. It tied in how he wanted to win the big gold belt. Which, again, Logan at home, looking at the title history, I was very confused. But then Benoit, Shawn Michaels, and Triple H had that great match at 20. Benoit wins. Guerrero comes out. They celebrate together. Great moment. Kevin Nash said it was 2 vanilla midgets standing in the ring. I think it shows something. You figure at the end of WrestleMania 1, Hogan and Mr. T were celebrating with Jimmy Snuka. So Hogan and Snuka. That's like the two big guys in WWE for faces. WrestleMania 10, Bret Hart's on the shoulders of everyone. Again, the big baby face. So then to end WrestleMania 20 with Benoit and Guerrero in the ring, I think that said something with how Vince always has his hand on the pulse. Unfortunately, I mean, looking at this moment now, knowing what we know now, I don't even know how do you even describe the emotion? I mean, after watching the whole show and that brief moment, you're like, yeah, the two best friends, and then you're like, shit.
Like if they both just retired right there. Like,
yeah,
I know. Like a lot of people have said that before. It was just like, fuck. Like it's not getting like knowing what comes next for both of them. It like it hits you. It hits you different.
I mean, I don't know. I made Triple H tap, which rarely happened, especially up to that point. And it was especially big too because you figure the year before he beat Booker T, and it's like, oh, they're not going to let a WCW guy do anything, and now two WCW guys holding the belts.
Yeah.
And while he then would win the World Tag Titles with Edge, beating Evolution, which, you know, that was always the trivia question: which superstars won a tag team championship with Chris Benoit, Hulk Hogan, and Rey Mysterio? Edge has had a pretty cool career.
Yeah.
They feuded with La Resistance. He fought with Kane. He eventually lost to Randy Orton at SummerSlam. Randy Orton was a transitional champion. This was supposed to be Randy Orton's big coming out party. I still say that everyone's like, oh, how come Brock did it better? Figure Brock beat The Rock, and he beat him in dominating fashion, while Randy Orton barely edged out Benoit. Now, again, Benoit wasn't bad in the ring. Benoit was fantastic in the ring. But it's like I've talked about before, certain people are just looked at as superheroes or megastars. Like if Hulk Hogan went in the ring on SmackDown and hit someone with a boot and a leg drop, it would be believable because it's Hulk Hogan.
Right.
But if who's Coco Beware came out and hit a DDT, people would be like, what's this old man doing? So I mean, Brock beating Rock, he beat The Rock. Right. And I mean, even looking back on it now, it's like, oh shit, that was a passing the torch moment. And this was supposed to be passing the torch. But Benoit wasn't the torchbearer.
No. Plus turning Randy Orton like into a babyface like the next night, was it?
Yeah.
Like, why? Like, young Randy Orton is the biggest asshole douchebag just by looking at him like you can ever get. Like, people don't want to like Randy Orton, especially back then.
They should have had Orton, and I thought this then. He could have beaten former WCW guys for the belt for like 6 months to a year.
Yeah.
Like, I'm killing your legend. I'm creating my own legend with the belt that you wanted to hold. Like, imagine how big of a heel he would have been. Hey, Booker T, do you want this title again? Nope. Hey, Scott Steiner. And then they could, hey, Big Show. Like, stuff like that. But instead, fucked that up.
Yeah, like, imagine Triple H and, like, Orton, like, main event WrestleMania, like, 21.
Yeah.
For the world title. Like, hold off on the turn until, like, No Way Out.
I find it funny. I've read somewhere that I guess it was supposed to be Orton and Batista. So you figure that's 2 WrestleManias where Orton and Batista were supposed to main event. And then they're like, no. Benoit started feuding with Edge. Then it came to the first Money in the Bank match, which, again, phenomenal. It's a great piece of history. Sucks that Benoit's in it because, again, it doesn't really get talked about. I mean, yeah, Edge won it. But, I mean, the names in this.
Yeah, it's one of those matches that if it ever appears on TV now, it's super edited and worked around just to show Edge's victory.
Yeah, Edge, Benoit, Jericho, Shelton Benjamin, Kane, and Christian.
Plus, Benoit has that horrific spot, the headbutt dive that, like, looking back now is just like, fuck. Like, why would you do that?
This match, I think my favorite Money in the Banks for this one and the next year's, because you figure the next year had like Rob Van Dam and Ric Flair, and at this time you couldn't. I feel like now, if you were to say, "Hey Logan, book a Money in the Bank match," I could pick out the 6 to 8 people. I could be like, "Oh, you need to have these 2 people for a spot. This guy's gonna win it. This guy's gonna be the big guy who dominates for a second," that kind of thing. But I mean, back then, you had no idea, and we had no idea who would win. Any of them could have done it.
Yeah.
Jericho had been mid-card for a while. Shelton was on the rise. Kane, mask had been off for a little over a year. Christian was coming into his own as the CLB. Benoit had just reached the mountaintop. And Edge won. Let's see. And Benoit was, I didn't know this, but he was the first man drafted back to SmackDown in the 2005 draft lottery. He participated in an ECW-style revolution against the SmackDown heels. And at One Night Stand, he fought Eddie Guerrero. This is another great match. And it's talked about on commentary how these two never had an ECW match. And you can tell that Eddie is upset during it because he had to lose and they didn't have enough time.
Right.
Which you would think with these two, they would have all the time in the world, as they represented, I think we talked about in the last show, how ECW went from hardcore wrestling to technical wrestling. And these two were definitely the technical prowesses. After this, and unfortunately that'd be one of the last times that these two would be in the ring together. After this, Benoit won the U.S. title from Orlando Jordan. He did it in 25 seconds. One of my favorite gimmicks at the time was Benoit showing things he could do in 25 seconds or less.
Oh, yeah.
So the one was like making coffee and drinking it. The one was peeing. And I remember the one, that this could just be a memory I created, but I remember him coming out after peeing, there being a lot of time left, and him going, "Oh, wait, I forgot to wash my hands," and going back and washing, and then coming back and be like, "Now it's my time." When he needed to be, he could be charismatic. He fought Booker T again.
It's crazy that you bring that up, because that's just some of that stuff you just forget about.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of Benoit Guerrero stuff's kind of blocked out. You figure at that time, we would have been 10, 11, 12. I mean, it was a big time in our lives, especially as wrestling fans.
Yeah.
And those two, I mean, essentially, the only way I can think to equate it would be like if someone like Dolph Ziggler suddenly died. So, I mean, it's not that Benoit and Guerrero were ever like our favorites at the time.
No.
But they were always there. So if like one day Dolph was just dead, it's like, oh shit. And then you realize like, oh, we're missing something here, you know?
Yeah. That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, he feuded with Booker. Then November 13th, 2005 happened. Eddie was found in his room dead. Chavo put it best on Dark Side of the Ring how much it impacted Chris. He said he let him know and he heard a wail from the lobby. And he said this is a guy that typically showed no emotion.
This is the beginning of the spiral that Chris would go on.
Oh, yeah.
That we get into in the next few episodes here.
Yep. But that week, Benoit defeated Triple H in a tribute match to Guerrero. I think Ray beat Shawn Michaels on that Raw.
Yes. Yep.
Benoit and Dean got in the ring with Triple H. But you could tell how much it hurt Benoit. When Eddie went into the Hall of Fame, and I'm jumping a little bit here, but Benoit was obviously the most physically, mentally, emotionally hurt.
Yeah. Which
is pretty big to say, considering it was him, Dean, and Chavo up there. But you could just tell how much it impacted Chris. After this, I think the interesting part of the Eddie thing, too, is looking back on it, you can look at Eddie Guerrero and you can kind of see his physical change months before he passed.
Yeah.
Like, it was obviously due to his heart, but you could see... I don't want to...
huge.
It was steroids.
Oh, Oh, it definitely was. I'm not gonna
Yeah.
say what I have written down. But yeah, something happens in the hotel room right after Eddie dies that I don't think many people know about. So,
but you figure Eddie was supposed to win a world title then. The rumor is, I think it was Batista and Orton were going to be in a match. Eddie was going to somehow get put in a triple threat. He was going to roll up Batista, who was his friend, which then would have led to "You're supposed to be my friend," which, you know, Batista and Ray did years down the line. Yes, this impacted Benoit. He then got to do a best of 7 with Booker T, which I always think they did that so that way he could be on autopilot.
yeah.
I mean, with how well the matches were in WCW, he didn't have to think. Booker could kind of lead it. So, I mean, at that point, your best friend's gone, and then you're losing other people until your own death.
Slow,
you know.
one by one. Like,
Yeah.
right
Johnny
after
Grunge, who was a friend of his, Mike Awesome, Bam Bam Bigelow. I know Sherry Martel was in there, and it was all people he worked with too. Then at 22, WrestleMania 22, I mean, Benoit and JBL fought for the U.S. title. Benoit entered the King of the Ring tournament. He lost to Finlay in the opening round. Then Benoit was one of the first people to get inducted into the Hall of Pain by Mark Henry. And I remember this image whenever they talked about the Hall of Pain. It was Mark Henry doing the spot where Benoit's hanging over the ropes. Mark Henry jumps on his back, and then Benoit like spits out blood to show that like ribs are crushed. And it was always just like a gruesome visual.
Yeah.
And especially because, again, Benoit's supposed to be this muscle guy, really doesn't get hurt. You're seeing Mark Henry do that to him, and you're like, oh, this guy's the real deal. He had a WrestleMania 23 match. We both were there. He fought MVP, like I said before this. Very cool to watch.
Before we get too far ahead, because right after that, he took some time off to heal injuries. It was during this time where he would begin to form the initial like outline and plans to start the Chris Benoit wrestling school.
Yeah,
because he wanted. This is one of the first times he was starting to consider retirement. I think it was David. It's either David Benoit or Nancy's sister that brings it up. That they tried talking him into retirement around this time due to like his injuries and like his mental health was like it was noticeably declining. I don't get why like Benoit's friends and fellow wrestlers keep saying that they had no idea when it seemed obvious to everybody else who was affected by this.
right.
But we'll get into that. We'll get into that.
I mean, it's always interesting. It's one of the people that I've seen. You might know more because you did research, but I've seen that it was outspoken about it and saw that he noticed something but didn't want to speak up was Regal. And the reason I find that interesting is because you figure if you made a list, you know, William Regal, Chavo Guerrero, Finlay, Dean Malenko, Regal's the one that had like the mental health issues too.
Yeah, Regal, he was one of few from. Yeah, I think a lot of the WWE guys that came from WCW, like Finlay, Regal, I fuck up others. They're blanking, but I have them written down somewhere. They lived like in the same area. So,
Wasn't Terry Taylor there?
Yeah.
Yep.
Regal knew of Benoit's issues, his problems with Nancy. But he's one of the people that have talked the least about it since then, and it's always interesting. I hope he like writes some sort of book or eventually comes out with it, because
Regal's been around a lot.
Yeah, plus he's the one that has that really, like on the Chris Benoit tribute show, his sit down, he doesn't get emotional really. His kind of stands out from the rest. He just says, Benoit was a great worker, and that's all I really have to say at this time. And he gets up and walks away. And it's always just wondering, leaves me wondering, like, what people inside.
Yeah, what did he know?
What did he know right there? Like,
because I know you asked me, You said the Sandman
Yes.
at one point said, you know, when Vince McMahon called everyone in, we knew at that point Chris Benoit was dead. He asked me what I thought about that, and I said, because everything you hear is people weren't worried about Benoit until he no-showed an event.
Yeah.
And I look at that as, I don't even want to say old timers. I would say men, probably our age and up, have it in them where whether you're sick, you're hurt, something happens, unless it's like vomiting or a close death, you know, you're not going to miss work. And Benoit, especially, you know, always in the gym, always in the ring, but a no-show. I think that was, it's like, well, Benoit's either going to be here or he's going to be dead. So for him to miss 2-3 shows,
A pay-per-view.
yeah, it's like, yep, he's done.
Yeah. That was just something that stood out to me because when I was doing research, once I had everything written up, I was looking for like shoot interviews about like what wrestlers at that time saying like what happened like in the arena, and that like caught me off guard when Sandman said that. He was like, "Yeah, we got called to the Vince McMahon called a meeting and we knew Chris was dead." And then he announced it that Chris, Nancy, and Daniel were all dead too. And I was like, huh. Always thought it was, because the lie, we won't get too much into it, but the lie that Chris was saying to his
Food
coworkers,
poisoning, right?
It was food poisoning, and he felt fine, he was gonna make it, and then he didn't. So I just wish that wrestlers were more open about what happened in that time instead of trying to protect him still. Like,
right.
I want to know. I want somebody to come out and say that what they actually think. So.
And the reason that I brought Regal up too is because I'm sure eventually he'll say something, but I'm sure it's got to be hard because, I mean, he wasn't only in like that scene, so you know the WCW scene where everyone was going. He's in the British scene, and so a little bit of Canada. So he figured he had just lost Davey Boy a few years earlier too.
Yeah.
And then drugs and alcohol kind of controlled his life. So I'm sure Regal's mental health was shot.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's like you listen to him even talk about Eddie now, and you can tell he just doesn't want to. But then someone like Chavo, who was obviously close to both, like he became close to Chris after, like extremely close. He kind of openly talks about it, and I mean he's sad, obviously,
right?
But he's not. I would not be as positive as he is.
No.
About Eddie or Chris. I'm not saying he's positive about Chris, like, yep, killed his wife. But, like, his vocal, his tone doesn't change. And I don't know if he's just so numb from talking about it. But, I don't know. But to get back to this, we did the Mania with JBL. I was getting to WrestleMania 23. Before that, he had a little feud with the Guerreros as he was helping Mysterio because he was confused why they were acting like that. 23 was fun.
We were there.
Yeah. After this, which I was I really like ECW. I was really excited WWE ECW. Still had hope. Benoit was drafted to ECW. And he was the first one, which looking back on it now, it makes sense. WWE ECW, I've said it before, they wanted it to be NXT then. So you're going to have young guys that needed to be groomed, like your Lashleys, your Kofis, your Sheamuses, and you were going to have veterans to help them. And these veterans would also get experience like producing house shows, that kind of thing, which we saw later down the line with Finlay, Matt Hardy, Kane, Goldust, just to name some. Benoit was really the first.
Right.
Because all the other veterans on ECW were ECW guys, and besides Tommy Dreamer, none of them really knew WWE style. And the matches, we could have got Benoit and Punk.
Yeah,
Eventually, we could have got a Benoit and Kingston. I mean, like we said, and we spoke about at length, imagine NXT now. I'm not saying Vince wouldn't have taken it back like he did, but you could have had Triple H, Shawn Michaels, Chris Benoit, and Eddie Guerrero as your trainers, with Dusty Rhodes helping with promos.
Let's imagine all the people that came out of his own wrestling school that he was going to open up.
Yeah.
Like, imagine how just like a butterfly effect of what could happen.
Would have been.
I go into it a little bit. Cause I ponder the question, like what we're talking about now. Like, what would like today's wrestling landscape if both Chris and Eddie were still alive? And I even asked a question, like, would Chris still be physically able enough to wrestle? Because I feel like he would be participating in the Owen Hart Cup coming up on AEW.
Yeah.
I feel like that's something he would want to partake in, since he was on the Owen Hart tribute show, both from Canada. They both started around the same time in Stampede Wrestling.
I think if they'd have been healthy, because I've thought about this a lot, Eddie would kind of be a Rey Mysterio, or even a Jeff Hardy, or kind of like they're doing with Finn Balor now. He wouldn't be the guy, but when they would need someone for something, or they'd need someone to put with a celebrity, or, you know, the kids love him, that would be Eddie. And Benoit, I unfortunately think, would be like a Bret Hart and would have a career-ending injury. But I mean, you hear Bret Hart talk about how if it didn't happen, he could still work today's game. I think Benoit would be the same way if he didn't get hurt, or, you know, obviously if he didn't kill himself, he would have been able to still work with these kids. I mean, a Benoit and Daniel Bryan match, you're never going to hear anyone truly say it, but it'd be a dream match.
Right.
Benoit and Punk now. Benoit and I think Seth Rollins. Benoit and Randy Orton. Benoit going for a headbutt and Randy Orton catching it in an RKO. I mean,
yeah,
there's a lot. Benoit was I don't want to say an originator. He kind of wrestled the indie style before it was a thing.
Yeah. I
mean, like I said, he incorporated strong style. He had high flying. He did technical. But I don't know. It's not a dream per se. There's a lot that those two could have done, and a lot that they could have in the industry.
Well, you can call it a dream. It just sucks that there's a universe out there that it happened, and we're living in the one where
But I mean, especially those two, they just loved it so much. You know, they would have done anything. And I mean, NXT, it would have been. You would have had Regal there too. I mean, shit. So, as a wrestler, you could have been trained by, like I said, Michaels, Benoit, Guerrero, H, Dusty, Regal. Not to mention, I mean, Malenko probably would have followed them to NXT.
I was going to say, I'm sure they would have got Malenko a job there.
And, I mean, I'm wondering if when AEW started, if they would have been... I mean, again, you could have had Benoit, Guerrero, Jerry Lynn, Billy Gunn.
Right.
Like, there's so much that could have happened, and it's we haven't even got to that point yet. But it's shitty. As you said, Benoit was supposed to fight CM Punk at the finals of the ECW tournament, which perfectly showcased veteran and new blood. Didn't make it. Replaced by Johnny Nitro, which, looking back on it, it's probably the best replacement they could have done. But the night of, I'm sure people were pissed. Johnny Nitro had just recently left Eminem.
It's the fans had really no idea. I mean, like all the people, like fans at least that I've heard talk about it when they heard that Benoit was missing the pay-per-view for a family emergency, like nothing like crossed their minds.
No,
it was just like, that kind of sucks. Benoit probably will just get his rematch a couple weeks from now and to make up for it. Whatever. It's just vengeance, right?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, and I heard a lot of people thought it was a work, like a way to get him out of the match, so that way Punk could win. And the Nitro one, and they're like, Benoit will come out.
Yeah.
I guess Stephanie McMahon indicated that Benoit would have defeated Punk for the title.
Yep.
Which then he would have been the second person to hold the WCW, ECW, and WWE championship. I mean, then that's when everything, I guess you say everything changed.
Yeah. Benoit did not show up to Vengeance. He did not get on a plane to Corpus Christi, Texas. And that's kind of where this will end. And the next couple episodes will begin. Our next episode, we'll be talking more in detail about Chris and Nancy, how they met, and kind of how their domestic struggles were happening kind of behind the scenes, unpronounced to us fans, but definitely known by people in the community, including their wrestling friends who...
Yeah. And like we've said, it's unfortunate because he has so many matches that are good. I mean, some even great, but Peacock and WWE doesn't have them sorted. And it's one of those things you don't really want to go out of your way to look at.
I'll tell you, I haven't gone on my way to watch Chris Benoit match. I don't think ever. I can't tell you a match I've sought out to see just because I wanted to watch him wrestle, which kind of sucks. Like I said, he does have a lot of great matches. He was a great technical wrestler. But yeah, all that went away.
It all went away. And then the part that I find most interesting in them wiping it all away is, of course, being the wrestling nerd I have a WWE encyclopedia.
Yep.
And for some people, like, your Al Perez's or like individual Spirit Squad members that aren't Dolph Ziggler, just a little blurb, no picture, blah, 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 this, blah, 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 at WrestleMania, that kind of thing. And while it's got like a solid 2-3 paragraphs and it's got a picture of him. So with everything they try and wipe away, and this isn't like the first encyclopedia either. This is the most recent one.
Really?
I just find it fascinating. He's still got a picture.
I guess so.
I don't know if it's one of those things where maybe their thought process is they don't want kids Googling him to see what he looks like.
I guess
so. It's like, yep, here he is. Here's the murderer. Or, I don't know. This was big. I know that we're going to talk about it on that in your podcast, your scripted one. But I think I mentioned it before. It was like so big. I had the SmackDown vs. Raw 2007 GM mode. My dad and I each had a show. And like when it turned out he did it, because you figure leading up to it, like for what was it, 1 or 2 days, people didn't know what happened. So it's like, oh, he was killed. And as a kid, you're like, oh, that's shitty.
Yeah.
Wrestler got killed. And then when it turned out he did it, I traded him off my show. Like, I mean, looking back on it now, it's silly because I still have like a figure of his, and like I say, I'll talk about some of his matches. But at the time, it just, lack of a better term, it like shook me.
Yeah, and I said it. I think on our couple episodes ago, we did like a get to know you, like icebreaker episode, or whatever we called it. This is the time I kind of stopped following regularly. Was like right after this, like the summer, because I can't tell you what happened like off the top of my head, like this coming fall, like leading into WrestleMania 24. Like the only thing I know of is the Flair retirement angle, and I think that's about it. I did not like watch Raw and SmackDown weekly like I did for like the previous 4 or 5 years. I'd only like I'd hear information come out because I still had a couple friends that watched regularly, and every once in a while I'd be interested, and I'd go to WWE.com and see like what happened. But it wasn't until like WrestleMania 27 ish where it was like I heard The Rock was coming back, and The Rock was like my all-time favorite growing up, and then the 2011 pipe bomb. Now then here we are, but it sucks.
And again, I know we'll dive into it more because I'm sure because we've talked about it at length. Because I even have the Chris Benoit DVD. But I remember you picking my brain, and I'm sure you were trying to get me to be one of those. Oh, he needs to go in the Hall of Fame. He was framed. Kevin Sullivan did it. But it's shitty because, and it's the only way I can equate it. It'll make sense to you. You've seen how I make my guys' movesets on the games.
Yeah.
German suplexes, like stuff I could probably do, like easy, simple, chops, maybe a diving headbutt. And why, as unfortunate as it sounds, if I were to look back and be like, wow, who made me think like even I could be a wrestler? It was him. Yeah. He didn't have an outlandish look. He was, let's see, 5'11", I'm 5'10". He was 229, I'm 180. I'm sure if I worked at it a little, got muscle, I'd be right about there.
Got a couple bee stings.
Yeah. And like I said, he didn't have to talk great. He didn't have like odd music. Like his music was a rock band that I listened to. It's odd. And then to have it like all wiped away, and then like I said too, it made it where you didn't want to say you're a wrestling fan. You had people like Nancy Grace trying to cancel wrestling, and I don't know. It was difficult. I still, like I said, I have a couple of his figures at my most recent convention. I talked about in the Four Horsemen reunited with Mongo, Dean, Flair, and him. I bought that Four Horsemen pack.
Mm-hmm.
I have a Chris Benoit figure. Fun story about him to kind of make it lighthearted at the end here. Family Christmas. I had cousins and aunts and uncles. Grandma got me a gift because she wanted, she didn't want me not to have one.
Right.
And she asked me for wrestlers I had. I said Chris Benoit. She bought me a Chris Benoit because his name is spelled Benoit and thought it was a different guy. She thought it was Chris Benoit.
Benoit.
So then I got it and I opened it and I'm looking at it and she's like, what's the matter? And I got him. And I had the wrestlers there and she's like, what do you mean? She said, I'm like, yeah, this is Chris Benoit. And she's like, no, it's not. I'm like, yes, it is.
That's Chris
And
Benoit.
what made it worse is the figure I had, he didn't have facial hair and it was just generic red pants.
Right.
The figure she got me is the one I still have. He had his facial hair, yellow pants, and it said for real on it.
It's a different guy.
So, I've still got that one.
It's a different guy.
Yeah, but it sucks. The people who defend his actions, and I know we're running longer here, so most people won't hear this, but the people who try and defend him, he had a brain of an 85-year-old.
Oh yeah, we'll get to
Yeah, well, my great grandma was 84 before she passed away. She didn't go kill people. All right.
Yeah, we'll get into it. It's a combination of CTE and the drug abuse. It was everything. You can't just say, oh, well, like I can't think of a dementia patient going on a killing spree, and especially the way I will describe in a couple episodes how he killed them. It's not.
There's a couple wrestlers I'll throw in to let you know that had dementia, and the most that one did was body slam his roommate. It's just there's a lot of, like I said, 2007. I was 11. You were turning 11, if I believe, because your birthday's August.
Nope, June 19th.
September.
His final match was on my birthday.
Oh yeah, it is June because you never got a poster.
619. Yep.
You never got a poster.
Shut up.
But it was a lot to take in because I don't even think before that time there was really a celebrity that anything that dramatic had happened to, like in our lifetime. Like there was no Chris Farley dying of speedball. There was no Princess Diana getting ran off a ledge. There was no Selena getting shot. Like this was the big one.
Yeah.
And especially since we were involved in the wrestling landscape, a lot of people reacted differently. And I'm always intrigued to hear how old, new, or not even wrestling fans react to it.
Well, I'll tell
But
you
I mean,
before we wrap here,
Mhm.
what I heard happened. I was at a friend's house.
Uh-huh.
It was Monday, obviously.
Yep.
I was excited. I specifically called my mom, like, Mom, because it was summer vacation. School just got out.
Yep.
Like, Mom, you need to come pick me up at 7:30, because this is the like a 3-hour Raw. They didn't do them every week then. So like, you need to pick me up
Yeah.
at 7:30.
It was the week after Vince.
Yeah, so I can get home to watch Vince's funeral, right? So
Yeah.
I told that when I'm hanging out, I'm having a good time. Like, we didn't have smartphones or anything, so I'm oblivious to the news of what happened.
Yep.
My mom comes, picks me up. I was telling her, like, man, I can't wait. There's gonna be a funeral tonight on Raw for Vince, and we're gonna find out who did it. And she's like, honey, Chris Benoit died. I was like, no, it wasn't Chris Benoit. It was Vince McMahon. Vince McMahon died. And she's like, no, Chris Benoit died for real. And like, she kind of explained to me, like, they're doing a tribute show for him instead. And that sucked. And then the next day, waking up and then hearing the news about how it happened, it was just like, shit.
So I remember my first big wrestling death that I remember was Road Warrior Hawk. That was getting on WWE.com, it being the big thing. I'm like, huh. And this was before school, because I'd always look to see if there's like a trade between brands. I remember one time I saw that Kurt Angle won the title in a battle royal at a house show before it aired. So I would always look, and I'm like, oh man, what can I find? Hawk was there. I'm like, well, that sucks. I really like them. Years later, same thing. Eddie Guerrero. I'm like, what the hell? Went to school, went about my day. This time I had not seen it yet. I don't know why I didn't look. I don't know if maybe I was grounded. I don't know if I don't know. Raw came on and I'm sitting and I remember where I was. I could tell you where the TV is, where I was sitting, and then the graphic flashed. I'm like, what was that? And then Vince is in the ring and he says it. And I like ran to the computer and I looked and there it is. Whack, his image. And I'm like, wow.
I think I did the same thing when I got home. Because I can see that WWE.com front page, like, it's burned in my brain.
And I got because I had quite the wrestling figure collection. I got all of them that could be like connected to him.
Oh no.
And I would stay at my grandma's and I would go and I did my own like tribute show.
There you go.
So you figure I had my Bret Hart, my Jim Neidhart, Chris Jericho, Jeff Jarrett, like big old tribute. And then CNN's like, oh, we're going to announce what happened. So I lined them up in front of the TV and they're watching with me.
Oh no.
And then they said it. And the fucking Bret Hart and Jim Neidhart figures fell over like they were shocked.
Oh no.
And my brain couldn't comprehend that someone that I would pretend to be, because again, it was easy, do a diving headbutt. Hey, Dad, lay there. I'm going to be Chris Benoit. Hey, Dad, lay there. I'm going to do the crossface. Killed people and himself. Like, I think that was one of the first times I realized what suicide was. That there were just so many things going through my body. Like, I couldn't imagine now being 26. Yeah.
I had to think about that one.
Being 26, like imagining what an 11-year-old's thinking.
Right.
When someone, like I said, it's not their favorite, but they liked them.
But you gotta think, this is you're a pre-internet 11-year-old. Like, 11-year-olds today are way more mature than we were. We were still playing with action figures at 11. They're playing Fortnite.
Hey, I still play with action figures now.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, and that was going to be my question, just to kind of end on it, because I don't know if you touch on this in your thing. So if you do, cut me off. Do you think if social media had been relevant around during this, that Nancy would have been able to tweet something or get help? Not necessarily during the murder. But
Yes.
before, like with the abuse.
There is kind of, well, I'll do the murder part. Because the night of, I won't go too deep into it. She tries to make a phone call, and it doesn't go through. She doesn't know the number. So I'll leave it at that because we got to wrap. I have to get going somewhere. So
Okay.
but yeah, so make sure you stay tuned because we're gonna be deep diving this tragedy this weekend. You're gonna learn a lot of things you didn't know about people that you like.
And then on top of the Benoit thing, you might have heard some names during this, like Public Enemy, Perry Saturn. I mean, even some of the Japanese wrestlers like Atani. We are going to be doing a YouTube series.
Yeah.
Probably, I'd say 5 to 15 minute videos about superstars and tag teams.
Yeah.
Not necessarily underrated, not necessarily overshadowed, but ones that have kind of been lost in the wrestling mecca. Just something else to stay tuned for. Make sure you follow us on YouTube.
Yes, make sure you follow us on all the social medias. We're going to be starting this Chris Benoit, Complete Tragedy Chris Benoit podcast series very soon here. The first episode is going to be recorded here in the next couple of days. Logan will be with me on the call, so he'll be able to give his live reactions and thoughts to the show. So make sure you tune in for that.